After Massachusetts, the scene shifted to South Carolina. First, in the state legislature, which debated the Constitution before holding a convention, and then in the state convention itself, which was empowered to ratify the Constitution.
With regard to the liberty of the press, the discussion of that matter was not forgotten by the members of the Philadelphia Convention. It was fully debated, and the impropriety of saying anything about it in the Constitution clearly evinced. The general government has no powers but what are expressly granted to it. It therefore has no power to take away the liberty of the press. That invaluable blessing is secured by all our state constitutions, and to have mentioned it in our general constitution would perhaps furnish an argument, hereafter, that the general government had a right to exercise powers not expressly delegated.
Okay, so what? Here, Pinckney argues that there is no need to protect freedom of the press because the federal government could only exercise powers expressly granted to it. Since the federal government had been delegated no power to restrict freedom of the press, there was no need to protect it. Second, the limitations on federal power meant that this Constitution could safely be ratified.
For the same reason, we had no Bill of Rights inserted in our Constitution. For, as we might perhaps have omitted the enumeration of some of our rights, it might hereafter be said we had delegated to the general government a power to take away such of our rights as we had not enumerated. But by delegating express powers, we certainly reserve to ourselves every power and right not mentioned in the Constitution. Another reason weighed particularly with the members from this state against the insertion of a Bill of Rights.
Pinckney extends the logic to the entire Bill of Rights. The federal government could only exercise powers expressly delegated to it. Silence in the Constitution on a particular federal power means the founders denied that power to the federal government.
The distinction which has been taken between the nature of a federal and state government appeared to be conclusive, that in the former, no powers could be executed but such as were expressly delegated, that in the latter, the indefinite power was given to the government, except on point that were by express compact reserved to the people.
And here again, an advocate of ratification argued that the federal government could only exercise powers that had been expressly delegated to it. States, on the other hand, could do anything not forbidden by the state constitution or the federal constitution.
It is admitted on all hands that the general government has no powers but what are expressly granted by the Constitution, and that all rights not expressed were reserved by the several states.
Here we have another advocate of ratification of the Constitution who said the federal government could only exercise powers expressly granted. A power not granted to the federal government is forbidden to the federal government. A power not prohibited to the state is reserved to the state. And this is for a structural reason. The federal Constitution delegates powers to the federal government in Article 1, Section 8. It prohibits certain actions to the federal government in Article 1, Section 9. It also prohibits some actions by the states in Article 1, Section 10. No place does the federal Constitution delegate to the states any power whatsoever. This is because the states already had powers. When the people of South Carolina, for example, ratified their state constitution, they delegated powers to their state government. This precedes the federal Constitution, so the states already had powers.
In every government there necessarily exists a power from which there is no appeal, and which, for that reason, may be formed absolute and uncontrollable. The person or assembly in whom this power resides is called the sovereign or supreme power of the state. With us, the sovereignty of the Union is in the people.
Here Pinckney addresses the nature of sovereignty, which, according to Pinckney, resides in the people, as opposed to in the federal government. The federal government, for example, has the power to declare war, create alliances, etc., powers that only sovereign states can do. But this is because the sovereigns in our system, the people, have delegated those powers to their agent, the federal government. The federal government doesn't have them by right, it has them by delegation. On the other hand, the people of the several states were sovereign because when it was up to them to ratify the Constitution or not, there was no agency to whom anybody could appeal to overturn that decision. If the people of the state ratified, they were in. If they didn't ratify, they were out. And there was no place you could go to say, I'm appealing this decision, because the people of each state were sovereign.
No section or paragraph of the said Constitution warrants a construction that the states do not retain every power not expressly relinquished by them and vested in the general government of the Union.
In ratifying the Constitution, South Carolina made it clear that no interpretation in the future would invalidate South Carolina's understanding of the limited nature of the federal government and the reserved rights of the states. What would happen if those were to occur was left unsaid. Okay, so what kind of implications are there from the South Carolina Convention? Once again, advocates of ratification assured their skeptical peers that the federal government could only exercise powers expressly delegated to it, and every other power was reserved to the states. No Bill of Rights was necessary. Indeed, it might be dangerous because it might encourage erroneous interpretations of the Constitution.